So as far as what we've seen through 7 games, Dave and I were talking about it and throwing it out there, we're nitpicking a 5-2 team that's in first place. So keeping that in mind, what are the areas you look at? We're going, okay, the run game isn't – what's interesting is attempts are there. They have committed to it. They haven't bailed on it like it feels like they did last year, yet they haven't been overly productive either. They're, what would you say, 21st, ranked 21st or 22nd in yards per game. What do you think the biggest reason is for that? Is it the O-line? Is it the running backs, or is it the scheme?
My guess would be it's the offensive line. And I say that because certainly it's not a commitment issue. I mean, they have the highest designed rush rate in the NFL right now. And that's probably a big reason why they're 21st and not lower down the list there. Just they're 21st kind of by sheer volume more than anything.
Highest designed rush rate.
Yeah, designed rush rate. So it basically just takes away scrambles. It just measures the percentage of offensive plays that are actually designed runs.
Gotcha.
And excludes kneel downs and things like that. So, the highest designed rush rate. They're second to last in terms of yards per carry. So I think that's the more telling stat about how effective or ineffective in this case their run game has been. But it's I kind of compare it to last season. I mean, last season their run game was not very good because they weren't committed to it and they just weren't a running offense. I think there's plenty of reasons for optimism that they can get better with the run game because there is the commitment to it. It is their offensive identity. There is a proven system in place this year, unlike what they had last year. But back to the question, I would just kind of working through it. My best guess is that it is an offensive line issue. I mean, I don't watch plays and come away thinking that, wow, Ken Walker really had a lane there or Zach Charbonnet missed a hole there. I tend to look at it as there's a lot of plays that just never really get off the ground. I looked this up a couple days ago, and I can't remember the exact total, but suffice to say they were, I think, second in terms of the number of rushing attempts that went for no gain or that lost yardage. And that's despite, playing one fewer game than a lot of teams so far because they just had their bye. And so that is just kind of paints a picture of a lot of plays that just never have a chance to get off the ground. And that would, I think you would point to the offensive line being the problem there.
Hey, we got the trade deadline coming up here, and I'm just curious about what you think. I mean, there was a lot of talk, and really I want to talk about Riq Woolen mostly, but there was a lot of talk, just kind of rumors about, maybe he's going to be a trade candidate or whatever. But then Mike Macdonald stepped in and said, he's been playing really well, and I don't know if he's trying to throw people off the scent or
trying to drive up the asking price.
Yeah, or that. But what did you make of that?
Yeah, I what I can say is that the Riq Woolen trade speculation is not unfounded at all. I think that has very much been in play. I know that that's very much been in play, and it's not something that that has just been talk and not rooted in reality. That's not the case at all. At the same time, I think the reality with them has been that, they have kind of been in this position where they've needed him because, Devin Witherspoon has been in and out. So I do wonder if maybe the Witherspoon injury with, the knee injury that kept him out for, I think it was 5 games. I do wonder if that maybe kept them from being as aggressive in shopping him as they otherwise would have been. That's my speculation there. And, I heard the same thing you did about how well he played. And just that, to my eye, that was the case too. Like Riq Woolen played pretty well against Houston. And I don't know how much that's really going to change things in their eyes. Maybe with Julian Love still being out, I mean, maybe that situation affects it just because obviously they play different positions. But I do wonder if they would be maybe reluctant to move on from a guy, just knowing that there's already been so many moving parts in that secondary. But, I think that just going back to Witherspoon and Woolen, I mean, they've had to keep Woolen in that kind of number 2 cornerback role for much of the season when I really think that if everybody was healthy, he'd be the number 3 guy, and Witherspoon and Joe would be the top 2 cornerbacks. And then you would, Nicky Emmanwori kind of factors in that as well because he has shown that, he is their, I think he's played over 90% of the snaps the last couple of weeks as their primary nickelback. So when everybody's healthy, I really wonder what kind of role there's going to be for Woolen. But as we've seen, they've had a really hard time keeping everybody healthy.
Do you like Emmanwori in that nickel spot? Because Dave's talked about the idea of having Witherspoon on the outside feels like a waste because of how much chaos he can create being an inside guy. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, if you just watch the last two games in a vacuum, you'd say, yeah, Emmanwori belongs in there just because he's a playmaker and he's aggressive and he's a good tackler. And, they've shown that they can keep him in there even against offenses that run a lot of, 11 he's playing in there in 3 receiver sets where he's built like a linebacker, and where you typically he's in there in situations where you would typically have a traditional nickelback in there, but he's shown that he's got enough skills to be in those in there against those kind of offensive personnel groupings. And so but that said, we all know, I mean, we watched Witherspoon at his best when he's healthy. He's a playmaker inside, and he's an effective pass rusher too, an effective blitzer, I should say. So I don't know if they necessarily want to. My best guess is that they're going to continue to, they'll use both of those guys in there. But I do think that they're pretty good when Emmanwori is on the field, and so
which pushes Spoon to the outside.
Right. Yeah, where it keeps him on the outside. So, and that maybe factors into the Woolen situation as well, like I mentioned, because if Emmanwori is your nickelback now, and Witherspoon and Job are your 2 cornerbacks, then how much playing time is there for Woolen? That's one question. The other question is, well, you're still one injury away from being from having to turn back to the guy like they've had to do so many times over the first 7 games.
A couple of other guys. One of them, Boye Mafe, and I thought he was going to take off last year, and it didn't happen. But this year, man, he's played in 7 games. And I'm not sure what the snap count is, but he's only got 9 tackles, and he hasn't gotten a sack yet this year. I'm wondering if he might be also in the mix as far as maybe a trade or whatever. Or what do you think's going on with him?
It's interesting because he's one of those guys who gets a lot of pressure, but doesn't get a lot of sacks. And he's up there. At least when I looked recently, he was up there in terms of like pass rush win rate among edge guys. But I don't know how many sacks he has this year, and so that sort of leads me to believe that he's just one of those guys who doesn't have that same kind of ability to finish plays that you see those high volume sack guys have. Whether it's because the motor continues to run for those guys, or because they're just technically really proficient at doing what they've got to do to finish those plays. So he is another one of those guys, maybe I guess to some degree in the same kind of ballpark as Woolen, where you really wonder about like what's the long-term future. Yeah. He's in the last year of his rookie contract. They obviously haven't done a deal with him yet. When I think they had plenty of cap space to do that this past offseason. So it does make you wonder about what they think of his long-term future. And then, as we all know, they've got 3 guys coming up for what figure to be massive, massive extensions this offseason, meaning Charles Cross, Jackson Smith and Jigba, and Witherspoon. And, those are all going to be $30+ million per year deals. So it does make you wonder about how much money there's going to be left over for other guys who are up for contracts as well.
Yeah, and lastly, a guy on the defense, another guy, Tyrice Knight. And you mentioned how Drake Thomas, and Mike said it yesterday, played his way in, which is pretty rare. I remember thinking, like, if you don't have the starting job by the beginning of the season, it was hard to, unless somebody got injured, it was hard to kind of overtake the starter that's ahead of you. And Drake Thomas seemingly has done that, and I'm just curious about, where do you think Tyrice Knight's future is?
Yeah, well, I mean, Drake Thomas is making it really hard for Tyrice Knight to get his job back, and I imagine that the time that Knight missed over the offseason I can't remember what the injury was, but there was an injury, and then there was some other sort of unrelated medical situation that he was dealing with, right. And it cost him quite a bit of time, and I think, look, that's detrimental to any young player, but he seems like one of those young players who really needs those reps that he missed. And so that was a pretty significant setback for him. And I think that Drake Thomas, they really started going to him more early on because he's a very just technically assignment sound kind of guy. And I get the impression that they weren't. I don't know if they were getting that out of Tyrice Knight. And so, but now not only is Drake Thomas just doing the right thing, he's also making plays.
Yeah.
He's got a few sacks. I think a few tackles for loss. He pulled the Reggie White hump move on the tackle in Jacksonville a couple weeks ago, which I did not see that coming from a guy of that size to overpower an NFL tackle like that, but he did it, and so he's making it really hard on Tyrice Knight to get that job back.
Hey, you were talking about the deals that are going to be coming due at the end of the season for the three big deals that are going to be signed, and Woolen's kind of on the outside of that. Where does K9 fall? What do you think the feeling is about him? Because we've been talking about the struggles of the run game, but he's had some moments where he's looked very good, very explosive when they've had opportunities. Has he done enough, do you think, or does he have to really have a huge year for them to say, yeah, we're going to commit to him? How do you see his future?
Yeah, probably in the same category as those other guys, that the guys who just there's they haven't gotten the deals yet for a reason, I think. And I would never say never, just because there's still half a season or over half a season left, and he could go on a tear. But I mean, right now you're looking at a guy who's not he's splitting carries with Zach Charbonnet, and not necessarily his fault, but the run game is not going all that well right now. So and on top of that, there's been the kind of long running question about his availability and how much he's there at practice, which since the summer, since he got back from the foot and ankle injuries, he's really consistently been out there, to his credit. It's not translating into production, and I just again, there's only so much money to go around, especially when you got some of the massive deals that are coming down the pike with this team. And you look at, what obviously a big part of the equation is going to be what's the market going to look like. And if there's a similar market for him as like the Kyren Williams deal with the Rams, he got $10 million per year or something like that, then I have a hard time imagining the Seahawks giving him that kind of deal. But that would have to be a situation where not as big of a market as he would like, and the market really comes to the Seahawks, and it's a kind of deal on their terms.
Kind of interesting, all of the going into this weekend, like Scott Fitterer is working for the Commanders.
Yeah.
And then, you look at all of the coaches and the players and everything, kind of interesting. Nick Bellore, I had forgotten about him. He is still playing linebacker. I think it's like his 14th year. But,
same with Bobby, his 14th year.
Yeah, and Bobby, ridiculous with the 99% snaps and everything. I always thought that he, put that in there, in his contract or whatever. He wants to be on the field. And I don't know if that's a thing or not, but it's incredible.
Yeah,
his durability.
It really is. Yeah, I mean, some guys definitely have incentives and escalators built into their contract that are based on whatever percentage of snaps you play. The more snaps you play, the more money you get. So I haven't studied his contract, but that could be the case. It is, on one hand, it's remarkable that at 35 years old he's playing virtually every snap. I also kind of wonder if that's the best route. If any player at that age, if you would maybe be better off kind of spotting them a little bit more. Yeah. I don't know. I haven't watched him enough this season to really have a great answer for you there. But we can all acknowledge the physical, just how impressive that is physically to be doing it at that age.
Hey, what's your impression of Darnold been this season? I came in as a big skeptic, going, I don't know who he's going to be. Last year's version or the first 6 years, last two games, we talked all about him. And he's won me over in a big way. And what's impressive is we watched him in training camp, just in practice, and he had a lot of days out there. I'm going, man, he hangs onto the ball, and he looks unsure of himself, and then, boom, they hit the field, and he's a different guy, and he's chipped away at my skepticism completely. Where were you, and where are you?
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I kind of had the same thought watching practice. It's funny, I remember having the same thought 3 years ago in 2022 when Geno Smith was battling Drew Lock for the starting job. In no way, shape, or form did I see the kind of season coming that Geno Smith ended up putting together that year. So maybe it just speaks to my inability to evaluate quarterbacks in training camp. But it was. I think Sam Darnold was consistently better this training camp, and there were flashes, but I've been surprised by the level of playmaking that he has. And I always knew that, look, he was the, second overall pick. So obviously there's plenty of talent there with the arm and the mobility, but I just didn't know that he would be this effective at not only like escaping pressure, but making big plays on the run. Even like, it's hard for quarterbacks to throw on the move when they're going to their left and they're throwing back across their body. But it seems like every game he makes a big play while doing that. And he makes what I imagine, I've never tried it myself, but I imagine that's a very difficult throw to make. And he just makes it look routine. And so I think he's done, a very good job of avoiding sacks. Obviously, the one of them that he did have, one of the 9 sacks he's taken in 7 games was a pretty costly one. It was the one in the end zone. And he talked about that today, about how he's got to be, have more situational awareness to know that when you're in the end zone, you can't try to spin out of a sack like that, especially when you got Will Anderson bearing down on you. But by and large, he's done a really good job of getting the ball out on time and avoiding negative plays. And part of that is, he's not just avoiding sacks for the most part. He's making big plays. He's creating big plays on the run.
As far as Mike Macdonald, what's your scorecard on him? Like, what have you noticed? Anything quirky about him? He is kind of quirky, but like because you guys are listening to him almost twice a week?
Yeah,
3 times a week, and what do you make of him? And have you noticed anything from where he's really settled in this year from being a rookie last year?
It just seems like the more and more as he gets more and more comfortable being in that setting and just in that role, I think you're starting to see the personality come out a little bit more. And he's, he's not somebody who's going to come up there like Pete Carroll would and crack a bunch of jokes, but there is a lot of like just natural humor that he has. And apparently, I think Brian Nemhauser found this out, but so they do, he and several coaches do these like super early workouts together in the weight room at 6 a.m. And apparently he has developed a nickname as the Sheriff, because trying to piece it together, it sounds like he's, correcting people's technique and whatnot. You see him, he's like a very well-built guy, so he seems to know what he's doing. But he was kind of joking about that the other day. And so there's a good amount of like, self-deprecation and he comes off kind of to maybe people who don't listen to him all the time as the super stern guy, but there's plenty of personality and plenty of sense of humor in there.
Yeah, we saw him and John Schneider high-fiving each other over a joke in here that nobody got but them.
Oh, inside jokes. Those are great on radio.
They're so happy with each other. They were high-fiving. It was great.
Yeah.
It was great. Brady, we appreciate you as always, man.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, guys.
There you go.